Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayodirayat Nashta Prayashu Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Nigamaka Paduragari Tamparam Shukamakaram Rita Dravi Samitam Pivata Bhagavatam Rasamarayam Mahora Hora Sikububi Bhakam Krishna Swadama Pagate Damagini Karunashta Drishamasha Paranako Dinodidam Pamapiyadabashuta Vishutamipu Samapyadana Vidambiruxanam Prakyahidur Maram Sankleshanavaram Visandi Nanyataham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinubandha Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakantanamostate Jayatam Saruto Pango Mahamanir Matirgati Matsavasha Paramboja Radhanamadanu Sriman Rasarasaram Bibam Sivan Karsan Benishan Upika Kopinata Sriyasanam Divyad Bindaranya Kapadrumada Srimad Radhagara Shimashanashto Sri Shri Radha Shilagovanda Prashtanabihi Sevamanashmrami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Jagari Taya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Gurudhaja Mangalam Panidi Kaksho Mangalaya Tanohari Om Narayanaya Vidmihi Vasudevaya Dhimhi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Chabidnihi Vishnu Pandita Dhimhi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahadakshmi Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Sare Sare Hari Priya Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Kapti Kanchana Gaurangi Rari Vindavaneshwari Vishavanasute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauramani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskada De Sadhanine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Well, thank you everyone for getting back to these series of shows after the hiatus of last weekend. We went to New Paltz, which is a beautiful college town in the woods of upstate New York, where the devotees had their first ever Color Fest. It wasn't a huge event, maybe 300-400 people attended, but it's very near to where there's a bhakti community. And so having a festival in their neighborhood is like cultivating a garden in your backyard. These are the people with whom they're going to have a long-term relationship moving forward. And so what better way to sow the proper seeds than to have a color festival in your local area. I went there because I've done 100 color festivals and have a vision of what the color festivals can do. And I wanted to make sure that everything would be done nicely. There'd be a gratifying result on the part of the devotees. After all, they had a big expenditure of money and a big expenditure of energy. So I wanted to be there to encourage them and demonstrate to them that their efforts were not in vain, but rather very fruitful, and to make sure that having done one festival, it's not a one and done thing, but rather they be so pumped up, so enthused, so excited about their inaugural event that they immediately on the very heels of that event start planning the next one, which is exactly what happened. And that also happened earlier this year in Miami in April. Devotees had their first Color Fest in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Fortunately, for me, I was there, and 600 people came to that, 700 people, which is not a lot of people. I mean, compared to some other events, but it was enough people that the temple was really pumped up. Another thing which is gratifying to see about the Color Fest was that the devotees themselves, how they come out and how the inner child comes out, and they work very harmoniously, very lovingly together. They dance together, they throw colors on each other, they get goofy together. It's nice to see the devotees playing like children. It's almost like a glimpse of coming attractions in the forests of Vrindavan when we'll all be together again and enveloped in the Leela, the childhood pastimes of Krishna. So on a number of levels, the color festivals, I believe, are a great platform for bringing the devotees together in love and harmony, for enriching devotee relationships, and as a gateway for people to intersect with Krishna consciousness for the first time in their life. And speaking of all that, I'll be going to Michigan this coming weekend. There had been a second temple opened up in Michigan. The Detroit temple is long-standing. That was purchased by Ambarish, the grandson of Henry Ford, decades ago. And it was a couple years ago, maybe I don't know, time flies when you're my age, but it might have been more than 2 years ago. They opened a second temple in a place called Farmington. In fact, many devotees, Govinda Dev's been there, Sundari Priya's been there. I have never been to this second Detroit temple, but I'm looking forward to being there. They have it right on the temple premises, right in their parking lot. And this will be the second observance of the festive colors at this particular location. So I will be gone Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the fate of next Motivational Monday is in doubt. Sorry to inform you that so soon after last weekend. Krishnadas Tarachan, Govinda Dev, Carmen, John, Shali, Brent, Vaibhavi, and John. Thanks all of you for jumping, resuming along with us. A series of shows on Gajendra. I actually gave a Bhagavatam class in Ellenville, where the community is, and there was a whole bookshelf full of all kinds of books, all Vaishnava literature, great saints and sages and everything. And I said, can we do the Bhagavatam? That's what we do. That's what ISKCON is famous for, the Bhagavatam. So we did the Bhagavatam. We did Gajendra because that's all very fresh in my mind. So, and it was a very nicely received class as well. So where we left off last Wisdom Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays ago, was we talked about the qualities of a listener, the ideal listener, as personified by Maharaj Parikshit. He listened, Namesavo Parayani Brahmana Pibatochana Tad Bhakta Vibhanishatam. He listened for 7 days and nights. There was no rest taken. There was no time out for meals. There was no recess for cookies and milk or graham crackers. He didn't even, believe it or not, drink water for the entirety of those 7 days. He was so focused, didn't want to waste a moment in even essential bodily maintenance, but he wanted a maximum. He wasn't, what he must have been thinking, what's the use of maintaining my body at this stage when I've already got 2 or 3 days to live? So he submerged himself in the kathah from Sukadeva Goswami. We talked about all the qualities of a listener in quite a lot of detail last week. So if you missed that, or if the recollection of it is not vivid for you, go back. Those classes are on YouTube. They're still on Facebook, at least for another 3 or 4 weeks. Today, we're going to talk about the qualities of a speaker from whom one should receive the transcendental knowledge. Krishna tells Arjuna that I have selected you. I have selected you to receive the knowledge of the Bhagavad because you're my devotee as well as my dear friend. Now, what criterion does the potential sincere listener use in deciding whom he's going to listen from? There's a humorous story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came for his first time into the Jagannath temple. Upon seeing the deity of Krishna in the form of Jagannath, he passed out. Here he was on the floor, unconscious, glowing with bodily beauty, with youth, with vigor. After all, he is none other than Radha and Krishna combined. So we can only imagine the youthful beauty of this young sannyasi. And coming upon him was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the greatest scholar, the greatest impersonalist in all of Puri at that time. And we don't know how it was that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was an impersonalist with thousands of followers, got such a niche in the holiest Krishna town practically in India. But anyway, that anomaly was soon to be corrected in the following way. Sarvabhauma saw this beautiful young sannyasi, saw him passed out, and he assumed that he was a sentimentalist. He assumed that he'd lost consciousness, just like the sahajas, the ones who are all emotionally putting on a emotionally, their attachment to Krishna is not based on knowledge necessarily. It's not found in scripture, but it's an emotional eruption, emotional upheaval that causes them to appear before the deity, dance and cry and pass out. It's not, it may be a shadow of the real thing, but it's not anywhere near the real thing. So Sarvabhaumacharya was concerned that what he could do for this sannyasi to ground him in philosophy so that he would not stray later on from the path of devotion. It said the two big stumbling blocks are wealth and women. So this young, handsome sannyasi was certainly very attractive to women. And so he wanted, in his own mind, to help that sannyasi overcome future temptations. He had him brought to his house, and when Lord Chaitanya regained consciousness, Sarvabhauma received him very well, gave him a place to stay on reception, and he proposed that, can I explain Vedanta to you? Sarvabhauma's intention was to fortify this sannyasi with knowledge. His assumption was that Lord Chaitanya didn't have any knowledge. Of course, we know Veda Sham, Vedanta Evam Jam. Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, is the goal, the sum and substance of Vedanta. And all of Vedanta is meant to bring one to the point of worshiping and honor Krishna without any material desires. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Lord Chaitanya was a very high-class person. He was aware of etiquette at the time. And as a guest in the house of the great scholar, he agreed to listen for 7 days to the explanations of the Vedas from Sarvabhaumacharya. Now, Sarvabhaumacharya spoke 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, without Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uttering a syllable. He simply sat there, most likely with something akin to a 1,000-yard stare. And during all of this, Sarvabhaumacharya was wondering why he doesn't ask questions. He wasn't exhibiting the characteristics of of listeners that he was used to, ask pertinent questions, who seek for clarification on certain points. Entire 7 days went by, and Lord Chaitanya Maharaj did not say a word. And Sarvabhaumacharya said, "Don't you have any questions at all? Aren't you impressed by this exposition of the Vedantas?" And he said, "Don't you understand anything of what I've said? Because if you understood anything, surely you would ask a clarificatory question." And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I understand the Vedas, but I don't understand your explanations. They're so indirect. They're so tangential to the thrust of the Vedas, which is undivided devotional service to Krishna, that I don't even understand, what the connection between what you just spoke for the last 7 days and the Vedas is. Sarvabhaumacharya was astounded because he defined himself as a Vedantist. He'd spent his whole life studying the Vedas. He had thousands of people who followed him as an authority on the Vedas. And here's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu telling him he doesn't know a thing about the Vedas. So this brings us to the qualities of a speaker. Who is actually qualified to speak on Vedanta, to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam? And the first point is, they should not be scholars, they should not be yogis, they should not be ascetics. They should be those who are absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Tesham satyayuktanam bhajyatam priti dadami buddhi yogam tam yena pamapina. Taking the academic approach, you can study Bhagavatam, you can recite Vedas, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, but without bhakti, without the sense of devotion, you'll never understand even a word of the Vedas. It is to those who are constantly engaged in thinking of Krishna, serving Krishna, associated with Krishna devotee, dadami buddhi yogam tam yenam, that Krishna gives the understanding by which one can come to him. Otherwise, approaching the Vedas for one's self-aggrandizement in order to show off one's own intellect or to get name and fame, worldly acclaim, one will be barred from the inner truths of the Vedas. One simply does not have the PIN code. PIN code can be four digits, right? So here's the PIN code. Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyagi mam namaskaru. These are the 4 elements to get access to the Vedas. Think of Krishna, become his devotee, worship him, and offer your obeisances to him. You do these 4 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, you've opened the gates to the spiritual world. You've opened your heart to receive the flood of the light of transcendental knowledge from the Lord of the heart, in fact. The first qualification of a speaker is that he must be 24 hours a day thinking of Krishna, engaged in the service of Krishna, honoring Krishna prasadam, and associating with Krishna's devotees. Lakshno phalam tadisha darshanam him, tano phalam tadisha gatoshangam, jiva phalam tadisha kirtanam hi, sudurla bhavata. Okay. One who speaks the Bhagavatam must be situated on the unique and super excellent position of always associating with devotees, always speaking about Krishna kathah with his tongue, always listening about the topics of Krishna with his ears, always rubbing shoulders and mingling in the sankirtan of the other devotees. These are the characteristics of one who is qualified to speak on the topics of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, Vaishnava Mukodgaram Putam Hare Shravana Kartam Sarpachishtu Yataparam. What do you think the word Sarpachishtu means? Sarpachishtu. Sarpachishtu. That's called alliteration. And you know already by my acting it out that it refers to the snake. One should not hear Bhagavatam from one who is not a devotee. The example is given that milk is very good. The Bhagavatam is very good. It is the topmost subject matter for hearing and studying by all those who have achieved the human form of life. Idam Bhagavatam Nama. One needs no other literature than the Bhagavatam in order to achieve complete perfection of life. So it certainly compares favorably to milk, which gives many, many benefits to the brain, to the body. However, when milk, as good as it is touched sarpochishtam yatatatam, when it's touched by the lips of a serpent, even that nourishing, wholesome milk can have poisonous effects. Similarly, one should not hear the Bhagavatam from other than pure devotees. The person who sits on an elevated seat and speaks Bhagavatam should not do so as a show. It's not that during their other hours they're engaged in recreational activities, reading novels, watching DVDs, associating with mundane people, eating non-offered food. And then all of a sudden, they put on a show for the public for 1 hour or 2 hours, after which they go back to their mundane activities. First time I met Prabhupada was when he came to Australia for 4 days in May of 1971. I studied English in college, and you always have these novels, and on the back of the novel, there's a dust cover with information about the author. It says, this is the author. He went to school here. This was his career. He was a journalist, or he was in the CIA, or whatever it might be. He lives in New York with a wife, 2 kids, and 4 cats. And these are his interests. And his interests may or may not coincide, overlap with the subject matter of the book. So there was always this dichotomy, this disparity. This is the author, this is his life, and then this is the narration that he's created out of his imagination. There was that divergence. And so some or other, with my training and background, I expected that Prabhupada would be some or other different from his books. I was curious to know what the person would be like as opposed to the books. What struck me, associated with Prabhupada those first 4 days in Australia in 1971, was there was no difference whatsoever. Every word that came out of Prabhupada's mouth was quoting. He would either directly quote the Sanskrit and translate it, or just speaking without any Sanskrit quotations. He was quoting the Sanskrit. He was referring to the verses or the purports or the commentaries of the greatest acharyas of the past, every single word. Now, granted, there would be a little bit that he would work in, that he would knead into the narrative from his own personal background, his own personal upbringing in a Vaishnava family in Calcutta, his own experiences during his lifetime. That's maybe 5-6%. And that's common. That's what keeps the Bhagavatam organic. So it keeps it being passed down from generation, that each speaker adds a little bit extra, a little bit of one's own realization. Not that reciting or quoting the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti is apart from one's own realization, but the Bhagavatam is always evolving. There are always newer and newer realizations, newer insights, and therefore it's always fresh. It's not just fixed in time and space. It's not just an archived material, but it's growing, it's evolving, it's expanding. It's a living, breathing thing. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, the person who speaks the Bhagavatam, should be the walking, talking Bhagavatam itself. No difference between the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavatam. That should be the first criterion. It's not that the speaker puts on a show for an hour or two in front of the public, and then when he's in private, he talks about movies, he talks about novels, he talks about all kinds of mundane things. Whatever you see on the elevated seat, on the Vyasasana, if he's a bona fide speaker, is what you're going to see in private if you're the only other person in the room. There's not going to be any difference. That's the first qualification of a speaker. He does not speak Bhagavatam for making a show. And the second thing is, he does not speak Bhagavatam with any worldly desire. Lord Chaitanya Prabhu said, na dhanam, na janam, na sundaram, kavitam bhajagarim, amadanmani jampani, babatad bhakti rahaitakita. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I don't want wealth. I don't want women. I don't want followers. I don't even want liberation. All I want is to serve Krishna lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And one should not speak Bhagavatam with any ulterior motive of wealth, women, followers, or even liberation. If one does so, that means one is using Hari Kathah in order to gain something material in this world. That's not authorized, and that's not in your best interest. In the Bhagavad Gita, this verse appears, 9th chapter, 23rd verse. Yepi anya devata bhakta yajanti shariyam tepi mami vegan yajanti abhidi purvakam. Says that everything is meant to be used, subordinated to the end result of the user, the actor, getting full-blown Krishna consciousness. All of one's activities, one's eating, one's recreation, one's making a living, one's family interactions should be towards the end of worshiping and satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's just like a faithful wife. She tries to please her husband. A faithful husband, he tries to please the wife. Similarly, the single-minded focal point of a pure devotee is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead and tender all of one's talents, abilities, and resources in the service of the Lord. Anything other than that is illicit. It's like if a chaste wife thinks of pleasing another man, that is right there an illicit desire. Similarly, Krishna is saying, if we're to be chaste, faithful, pure devotees of the Lord, we think only of pleasing Krishna. Krishna is a source of everything. Krishna includes everything. There's nothing outside of Krishna. This is not apart or exclusive. This is not to be divorced from the world, but this is to water the very root of creation. And just like water is meant for the root of the tree, and it is uselessly spent putting on the twigs, branches, flowers, and twigs and buds. Similarly, any activity or any other person we try to please or any other goal or advantage we try to gain from Bhagavad Gita is like putting water on the leaves, branches, and fruits of the tree. It will be a wasted effort. The water has to go in the root of the tree. Example is given, you get pulled over for speeding by the side of the highway, and the policeman comes and starts to write you a ticket. So you'll think you'll save all the trouble of paying a fine, going to court, going to traffic school, having this infraction on your record by slipping the policeman $100 bill. You think that that's going to save you trouble in the long run. But the problem is that that's illegal. You're not supposed to give a bribe to the officer who pulled you over. He only represents the government. He's not an independently acting agent. For you to offer the trooper a $100 bill in order for him not to write you a citation will not get you out of trouble. It will not save you time, trouble, and money, but it will get you into a whole bushel full of trouble that you wouldn't have otherwise had. You think paying a fine and going to traffic school is trouble. You just try to bribe that trooper, and then you'll really find out what trouble is. So Krishna says, we want to avoid the principle of devotional service. We want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to worship Krishna. We want to go to church and temple, but we still want to have our ego. We still want to have our recreation. We still want to have our space. Krishna's over here. We're over there. Ultimately, you try to save yourself the trouble of getting along with devotees. Try to save yourself the income and not have to donate to the temple. You try to save yourself time by planning out recreational activities and trips, vacations, whereby you're apart from the temple for vast periods of time. You're going to get the opposite result. You're going to get into more trouble because everything ultimately is created, maintained for the purpose of being enjoyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhaktaram yagatapasham sarvalokamesham suriram gyatmamam chandamrichit. You want peace in your life, you want freedom from trouble, 3 things you have to do. You have to satisfy exclusively the Lord, not the demigods, not any other living entities. Try for exclusively watering the root of the tree. That's number 1, recognizing that Krishna is the owner, the creator, and the owner of everything. We don't own anything. We are not the proprietors. We are not the enjoyers. And then in addition, one should know that God is our best friend. He owns it all. He created it all, and nothing pleases him more than to enrich and to bestow inherited property on his sons and daughters. But we have to respect him. We have to honor him. We can't go off on all these tangents. In order to be suitable heirs to the kingdom, we have to stay close to the supreme well-wishing friend who is the enjoyer, the proprietor, who owns all of it. These are the qualities of the devotees sitting at the feet of such a qualified speaker. One should, how shall I say it? One should recoil from the thought of parlaying the Bhagavatam into one's personal gain. That will not benefit one, but that will be a source of even more trouble. In the Bhagavatam, first canto says, Dharma shayi pavargasha nartara dharma kantara kamo labaya hi shmidaham. Devotional service, pure devotional service, which aims at the satisfaction of life, is meant to free yourself from trouble, free yourself from anxiety. Without devotional service to the Lord, the burden of maintaining oneself, maintaining one's family, maintaining one's wife, maintaining one's country, maintaining the status quo, maintaining the highways, maintaining the internet, maintaining the nuclear reactors, maintaining electricity, maintaining electric cars, maintaining the coal, maintaining the energy, maintaining the water, that all this is so much headache. Devotional service to the Lord is meant to free you from all that stress and all that anxiety. Not that you don't continue to maintain things, but you no longer see yourself as the prime doer, and your goal is no longer sense gratification. Dharmasya pavargasha. Most people are working so hard, stressed out so much that you can literally, if not figuratively, see them foaming at the mouth. Working hard, pa ma ba ga, full of fear, full of anxiety, full of stress, wound up tight like a rope that's ready to snap. And this, you do not get out of this syndrome, even by elevation to heavenly planets. You read about Indra, the Kuvera, sons of Kuvera, many demigods themselves were full of stress, full of anxiety. And so even by rising up to the higher planets of this material world, one does not transcend, one does not go above the stress, which is innate in this material world. One has to take shelter of the Lord in order to become relieved from stress. Now, if you get the opportunity of association with a bona fide speaker of the Bhagavatam, you get the option to sit at his or her feet and hear the flow of pure kathah coming from one who practiced devotional service. And then as a result of receiving that transcendental knowledge, then you go out and you trade that in for some temporary material benefit like influence, wealth, money, fame. That is an anomaly. That is also another disturbance in society. One should never take what one has received from the pure speaker and use that in order to get some material and advantage, some material ambition. One should know very clearly, if one is a speaker and if one is a listener, that there is nothing higher than Krishna kathah. In India and elsewhere throughout the world, there are many traveling preachers, quote unquote, who do talks on the Bhagavatam. There's what's called the Bhagavat Sapta, just like Maharaj Parikshit heard for 7 days from Sukadeva Goswami. Speakers will come into a town and they'll speak the Bhagavatam for 7 days. Some of them are very popular, there's huge crowds, and there's a lot of money that's donated at that time. Now, one who speaks Bhagavatam should not do so with expectations of getting a lot of money. That in itself would pollute one's consciousness. That means that the money is greater than the Hari Katha. That means that the expectation of reward is your motivation, your reason for doing Hari Katha. Hari Katha is not the branch in order to get some other fruit. Hari Katha is the fruit which every other branch should lead to. So you should not use Hari Katha in order to get money for sense gratification. It's perfectly acceptable if you're invited to go somewhere to speak, to do a series of classes, to do a katha, that your hosts fund your travel. It's perfectly acceptable that at the end of it, they give you a donation, or they give you some cloth, they give you a kurta, they give you a dhoti, they give you, while you're with them, give you nice hospitality, nice prasadam. All of that is perfectly acceptable and even expected. But one should not expect more than one's maintenance. One should consider oneself amply rewarded as the speaker simply by virtue of the opportunity to share the absolute truth of Sumam Banam with an audience and thereby incur the pleasure of Krishna. Pritayitam karaparai parinataram mandam jasham mohayam ivamaya. After all of her trials and tribulations, Kunti appeared before the Lord when he was returning to Hastinapur. And she got from him, in exchange for 14 years of persecution, trials, and tribulation, she got from him one smile. And it wasn't even like a ear-to-ear smile. It was just a quizzical little Mona Lisa smile that Krishna bestowed upon her upon the occasion of his leaving for Hastinapur. And it thrilled her to the very core of her being. She was so satisfied to be the recipient of Krishna's quizzical smile. So excited. You can imagine goosebumps, hair standing on the back of her neck. She said, "Thank you, Krishna. That smile made it all worth it. In fact, if to get another smile like that, I would readily jump into, eagerly dive headfirst into another 13 years of trials and tribulations. Lord, you have more than made up for it. You've more than compensated for it. So if one can get a smile on the face of Krishna, that in itself is more than enough compensation for giving the Bhagavatam class and using one's time for that. Otherwise, a speaker, a qualified speaker, should live a very, very simple life. Not that one would use Harikatha as a platform to increase one's standard of living. People may give. It's not that you refuse donations. Prabhupada once said that we can use all the money of the world, not a penny for our own sense gratification, but we could use all the money of the world for spreading Krishna consciousness. Temples, farms, restaurants, hospices for devotees who are transitioning out of this world. I just heard yesterday that my old friend from Los Angeles, Mahendra, left his body. He was a wonderful devotee in charge of the BVT in Los Angeles during the 10 years that Vaibhav and I were there. And even in Utah, he always commented on our Facebook pages very favorably. And I believe he and his wife Sukita came here one time, a real gentleman. And he very suddenly transitioned and left his body, I think just yesterday. So go in peace, my old friend Mahendra. Otherwise, the speaker of the Bhagavatam, he may get, you cannot stop people from giving. And we even may encourage people for giving to the speaker, but then the speaker doesn't use what he receives. He doesn't use the funds that he receives to increase his standard of living, but he increases his standard of giving. That's the nature of a Vaishnava. They do not hoard money. Prabhupada said, a Vaishnava is he who, if he gets $1 million in the morning, he's a pauper again in the evening. Whatever he gets, he will spend that money for enriching and uplifting one's fellow men and honoring, establishing places of worship and places of pilgrimage for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if one gets income from speaking the Bhagavatam, it's not to increase one's standard of living, but to increase one's standard of giving. So that's the second qualification. First qualification is one should be a devotee through and through, 24/7. The second is one should not see Harikatha as a branch and something else as the fruit. Rather, one should see Harikatha itself, purely delivered, and without any expectation of recompense. One should see that as the fruit. Nigama kalpu turu galitam palam shuka mukaramya. Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic literature compiled by the great incarnation of Lord Vyasadeva. Third qualification is that the speaker should have friendship with those to whom he's speaking. The mood of the speaker should be to enrich the audience. The speaker should have great affection, compassion, and mercy on the listeners. Every conditioned soul in this material world has issues, have areas they need to improve in. Everybody feels themselves less than in this material world. And it is a fact that in this material world, we have placed ourselves at a disadvantage. We have made bad choices. Not that we should be down on ourselves and depressed and think of ourselves as less than. Not at all. We are children of the Most High God. We're crowned with favor. We're made in his image. We have royal blood flowing in our veins. But having said that, we also need to acknowledge the fact and take responsibility for having made bad choices. Those bad choices, those mistakes, don't negate our value, but they shouldn't be denied either. We had a color festival in Staten Island, New York in 2014. And one of the performers on stage, I remember he took a $5 bill and he crumpled it up. He put it in the dirt, he stamped on it, and then he threw it out in the audience to make his point. And he said, did anything I did that $5 bill, the putting up in the dirt on it, the crumpling of it, the grounding underfoot, did anything I did to that $5 bill decrease its value? Did anything I do lower the purchasing power of that $5 bill to only $4 or $3 or $2 or $1. No, even it's dirty, even it's wrinkled, even it's been grinded underfoot, it still has $5 worth of purchasing power. So we are valuable, especially in the eyes of the Lord. Others may criticize, but the mother, the father will always see the child in a special way. So even though the world condemn you, Krishna will always see his devotees in a special way. Even the devotee may, according to the estimation of society, perform an abominable activity. Still, Krishna says that devotee should not be discouraged. He should consider himself saintly because he's rightly situated. Now, it's not an excuse to live a soppy life or to make mistakes repeatedly, but it is the encouragement on the part of the Lord. It's the confirmation of the part of the Lord. And as long as you keep moving forward in devotional service, don't let mistakes, don't let occasional fall downs distract you from the path. We were discussing this verse in the evening Gita class a few weeks ago. And as I commented on it, I thought, Prabhupada knows English better than we do. There's a certain English that he was taught in Scots College in Calcutta. And I believe that when in proper English, when you use the word abominable, I don't think it's the same meaning as in English, like the abominable snowman or Hitler was abominable. I think that when you use the word abominable, according to the strict Webster Dictionary definition, it's not necessarily that the act itself is abominable, but that's how people describe it. That's how people see it. That's how critics and naysayers and backstabbers, that's how they'll talk about devotees. Oh, they're abominable. They're not contributing to the economy. They're sitting in the temple chanting Hare Krishna. They're not eating meat like everybody else should be doing, but they're eating fruits and vegetables, rabbit food. That's abominable. It's an abominable waste of life. It's an abominable waste of energy, worshiping God, when in fact the purpose of life is to work hard, get a big house, get a fancy car, enjoy sense gratification. Anything other than that is abominable. I believe that's the meaning of abominable. It is the condemnation that a twisted, misdirected society puts on those who are pure devotees of the Lord. It doesn't necessarily mean that devotees go around doing abominable things, but it just means that as direct practitioners of devotional service, materialistic people who are blind to the absolute truth see their use of time and energy as abominable. It's a word they use to describe, and actually, for the most part, pure devotee. Jiva navakti bhagavad navayaryam. No. Evam napanam suryam bhagavataya rati prashangashadadashu mahatsu yamyama prasha. There's a verse, I believe it's in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. It says that one who is chanting Hare Krishna should be understood to be a perfect lady or perfect gentleman. That's the result of awakening the Lord of the heart. That's the result of bringing light into the heart and banishing the darkness of ignorance. That one comes to the platform of acting naturally as a perfect lady and gentleman. And yet the verse goes on to say, I think this is Yamaraj speaking to the Yamadutas after they've come back from the bed chambers of Ajamil. Yamaraj is saying, if you find someone chanting the names of the Lord, you should understand that they are, for the most part, perfect in their behavior. Now, if they are not completely perfect in their behavior, then you should understand that they are on the path of perfection, that will come down the line, and never bother them, never approach them, never drag them away for punishment. They are in a separate category from normal, ungod conscious persons. This is the advice that Yamaraj gave to his assistant. So let's take this advice to heart. Chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Become, for our own part, perfect receptors of the truths of the Bhagavatam. Make sure that we receive the Bhagavatam from the right speaker, the right source, and in this way become part of the current of spiritual nectar, which flows from the mouth of the Lord down the chain of succession through his pure devotees, and then spreads it out like honey for the rest of the world to take advantage. That's all the time that we have today. There are actually some more points, several more points, 3 more points about a good speaker. We only talked about the first 3, and we'll reserve Transcendental Tuesday to talk about the next 3 qualities of an authorized speaker, the Bhagavatam. In the meantime, we have John Malik, who is the first to jump on, followed in short order by Bobby Christine Warden, Brent Spencer. Brent, I did get word from Jai Krishna through Facebook last night. He texted me and said he would not be able to come to the program yesterday, but that he would be there next Sunday to give the talk. Nevertheless, I think it's good if you're prepared, because you never know what might come up. And in any case, if you have a talk prepared, I will definitely make sure that you get the opportunity to use that in short order. So Shali, thank you very much. Happy birthday. What was it, 2-3 days ago? Happy birthday to you. You seem to have had a nice day amongst your family members. Govinda Dev, we've talked a lot on the phone. It's my good fortune that I'm talking with Govinda Dev almost daily now. I'll be going to Salt Lake City. A great friend of ours for many years, Sanch and Bhaskar. Sanch lost her father on Saturday. We went to the cremation home and chanted a few mantras, did some Ganga Jal and Tulsi. I'll be going to their home in Salt Lake City this afternoon to do a Shraddha ceremony. Krishnadas Tadar Chand, thanks very much. You've been dropping in on us more often lately. We appreciate it. Carmen's getting to be a regular. Thank you very much. Thank you for your class during your travel. The travels are over for the time being, but we'll resume this weekend again. Bharat, speaking of Festival of Colors, we had a wonderful Festival of Colors in Calgary on June 17th. I was very kindly invited there by Atmaram Das, who has been monitoring our talks ever since. I consider him a good friend amongst many other new best friends that I found in the wonderful Calgary temple. Sundari Priya, please accept my obeisances, all glories to Prabhupada. Carmen reiterates one of our points. Speakers of sacred scripture share for seva. It's their service. It's not that one should have the mentality of being a master because one's sitting on an elevated seat. One should have the mentality that I'm sitting on the seat which actually belongs to Vyasadeva, and I'm doing so that I can better serve people in general. Nice insight, Carmen. Thank you for that. Jean, Haribo, Jean. Okay, you have another poet here, Rob. I know you don't go on Facebook, but there's some other nice what do you call them, ditties that Carmen has come up with over the times. Listen to this, Rob. This is what she says. Krishna is the core of demigod lore. Those who seek more have a poor future in store. What do you think about that?
That was really good.
That was good. There's 4 rhymes in there. Core of lore, poor future in store. 4 rhymes and 2 lines. That's good. That's good. Thank you for that. Pragya and Yogesh check in from Dallas, Texas. That's where they live. They also travel all over the world, have all kinds of adventures. And Brent says, thanks for letting me know about next Saturday. Let's turn it over to the master, what should we call you? The master wordsmith. The wordsmith here, Rob. What do you have for us today?
How about an aspiring wordsmith?
Aspiring. We're all aspiring. We're all aspiring. We never reach perfection, but we always hope to be moving forward.
All right. Well, first off, that was a really good one by Carmen. I think you said it was. That was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of mine stand up to that today, but I'll go ahead and give them to you anyway.
Please do.
Be a transcendentalist, not a sentimentalist.
Nice, nice.
The Vedas are not meant for material gain, fame, or worldly acclaim. That's pretty much a direct quote of you, Prabhuji.
That was the theme. That was what we talked about exactly.
A qualified speaker's first component is to be thinking of Krishna every moment.
Very good. Nice.
Bona fide speakers walk the spiritual talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A speaker's only goal is to save your soul.
Nice. Yep. Very good.
A pure speaker is your true friend to the very end.
Wonderful. You're on your game too. I'm wondering if we can archive these or something. Anyway, they stay on Facebook. They're on Facebook. I post your comments, and any comments that from a Facebook is there. So that in itself is an archive. Anytime we want, we can go back and review them. Brush a little more dust off the mirror of our heart. So thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Anjali. Occasionally she comes in with something as well. And especially Rob, who is like an inexhaustible fount of inspirational quotes. It's my honor and privilege to get together with you Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week. I'll see you again 23 hours from now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.